everybody! Today I am here with the wonderful Christina Marie and Francina Simone. I am so excited to be chatting with these wonderful ladies, some of my favorite booktubers here. Today we're chatting about why we need to be discussing the Black Lives Matter movement here, specifically on Booktube. One of my fears is that the community will fade away talking about this topic, and I think that that would be a true tragedy. And as someone who has a bigger platform here on Booktube, I want to use my platform for good and to have these conversations in a way that is interesting and fun. So I'm really excited to chat with both of you today, and I think we're going to have a great conversation. So I wanted to start with a positive question. I wanted to start it out a little happy, and I wanted to ask you two, what have you found encouraging over the past few weeks? Something that has brought you some positivity or some light, or a moment that you've seen and thought, hey, things are going to be okay. How about Christina Marie? Do you want to? You look like maybe there hasn't been one, and that's a valid answer too.
It depends on the lens that I'm looking at it through. Individually versus societal, I have two different answers. For me personally, just the authentic support, from various people that have either reached out to me individually or called me or whatever. Even in those moments when I just simply didn't have anything in me, whether to talk about it or, it was just anything I could do to keep from crying every 2 seconds. So I think for me personally, just the people that I needed to hear from, I did. And that just kind of, kept me afloat, especially for the first couple of weeks. I am, unfortunately, the worst pessimistic realist, ever. And for me, because this is not new, for the Black community, for me, it's just, it's going to take a lot more than what's happening right now to make me trust it, almost,
Yes.
So that's where I am with that. But I do love, here's the positive, that people are eager to learn and that people are trying to figure out how they fit in this, and what way can they be vocal, and be active in the environment. Not everybody is going to go out on the front lines and, protest and things like that. There are plenty of things that can be done, through social media and within your families and stuff. So there is a lot of positivity happening. It's just me being a pessimist.
I think you've made a really excellent point, though. That is something that I actually don't think I've heard that often, and it's that this feels maybe more like a moment to people who aren't in the Black community and are kind of like, oh wow, this is new. For the first time, maybe we have to step up. And it's like, for people who are in your community, it's like, no, this is not the first time, but it's not less of an important moment, maybe, but it's not with the same vigor of clarity and newness that maybe a lot of other people are having. Francina Simone, are you in the same boat?
I would say yes. So, individually, it's the same as with Christina Marie. There's been so many people who do reach out, especially non-Black friends who have reached out and who had things to say. And just, different group chats where people are, constantly, calling out things. And, and the overwhelming support amongst people who I considered friends. And to see them step up in the moment. And it's like, oh, okay, y'all real okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, as a community, and I don't know if this is me being skewed, and it could very well be, but I feel like something that's given me a bit of hope is seeing more people okay with being very black and white about humanity. It's okay not to be black and white and to be nuanced about things, about objects, about books, but about people's humanity. Either you're here or you're over there. There is no neutrality. There is no, blankety blank, blank, blank. Either you aren't or you are. And I've seen people calling out. I mean, I wasn't the first person to call out Book Outlet. I was just probably the loudest because I had the biggest platform to double up and say, hey, look, and I have receipts. And so it was like, it was a good moment to be able to really shine some light, but I wasn't the first person to do it. Yeah. And so many people were retweeting, talking about their own experiences. Yeah. So many people were staunchly saying, that's not okay. And so many people were calling out their favorite bookstores, whatever here, whatever there, just like, what are you doing about it? What are you doing in your own company? So many people have been holding others accountable. So I feel like I have hope in this moment a bit because, especially and I also want to say with the younger generation, so many of them are like, I'm not about the excuses. Like, what are you doing? And they're not afraid to be like, that's performative. It ain't gonna work, boo. You crying? Wipe your tears somewhere else. I don't care. Like, so many people are so centered in that, whereas previously people weren't. And it was just, constantly stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, or derailing of a conversation, which makes anything you're trying to say go completely away. And that's how I feel like I have a bit of hope because of that. There's a bigger push and more people are staunchly like, I'm done. It's over. We're in Pride Month now. We're in the middle of a race war. We're like, no. Either you pick a side. Yeah. Like, that's it.
Don't forget to add on the pandemic, another element.
I know!
To really help us all out.
I mean, talk about it though, right? Like, pick a side. Are you really for people's lives here? Because you'll wear a mask if you are. Are you really for Black lives? Because you will stand with Black people if you are. Are you really for transgendered women and men or non-binary peoples? Because if you were, you would pick a side. Like, just say you are and realize that this isn't, and any kind of complacency in this aspect isn't. So
I think
that's what's giving me that hope.
I like how you mentioned COVID, because that's another, thing that's disproportionately affecting, the Black community. And there's just so much, stacked on top, I do agree that, it's nice to see the next generation. And I think that's probably where it needs to be right now. People who are my age and older retired, and to
put in our cup and we said we tried.
And to see the younger people just go forth and, gung-ho and take the torch. And it's just like, girl, if you need me for some research or to give you some history on something, I got you. But I cannot, do the whole physical standing up and walking and, staying up at all hours of the night, canceling people on I can't anymore.
Well, Francina, you pointed out a really interesting moment that I wanted to ask you about that is specific to our community. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is, obviously, more in general, it's something to say, I care about Black lives, or hashtag Black Lives Matter. But the real work I believe, will be done mainly offline, right? Will be in understanding how you as a human is operating in the actual world with actual connections with other people. And maybe that is like where you buy your books. That's like maybe a simple version of that, but that's the community that we're in, and this is the community that it's up to us to reform. People who are in Booktube or people who are part of the book world. So you mentioned the book outlet situation, and I would really love to hear, because I'm sure that there are people who haven't heard about it yet that are watching this video, what happened, and more importantly, what can we learn from that moment? How did it feel from your perspective?
So from my perspective, I like, just to give light for anybody who did not and was not aware, I want to say last week or the week before last week, there were just a few of the smaller channels of Black booktubers who were like, hey, yeah, like one of them just asked, hey, Book Outlet, what are you going to do? And like, what, I'm looking at your blogger friends page and you only have one person of color there. What are you going to do to, like, help with diversity? And their response was, we love diversity. We also have certain qualifications for you to be a blogger friend, and you have to be family friendly, and you have to have certain stats, a certain subscriber level and certain engagement on your channel. And that's where, I mean, like, anybody who's a person of color who has ever heard "you must be family friendly" knows that means you're not quite white enough. Because there were so many people who were white, who were vlogger friends, who stepped up and said, "What do you mean family friendly? I curse, and I say explicit things on my channel all the time."
And they explicitly said, like, people who don't swear. Which was like
explicit content and no swearing. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know of any booktubers who are strictly explicit. Like, I mean, book outlet, you sell smut, so I don't understand what you mean by, like, are they not allowed to talk about those smutty books they bought from you? Is that what you're trying to say? Or this no swearing thing, like, that was a thing where I think it was, I don't remember which channel it was who was the first person to say it, but I swear, like, what are you talking about? And also the engagement level, when they pulled that card, I was like, okay, I have receipts. I remember back in 2017, I had contacted them, and I said specifically, I'm looking at your page, and it's not very diverse, and I'm a growing community, I'm a growing YouTuber, and like, my numbers are growing exponentially all the time, and I'd love a chance to become a vlogger friend. And they said, oh, great. However, our program is closed, but if we ever open it up again, we'll let you know. Meanwhile, they never said anything about their family-friendly nonsense or even their engagement level. And the only reason I had reached out to them was because one of the people that I saw on there, it was just a white YouTuber. She had less subscribers and less engagement than I did. So I felt like it was a good, you know, like here's a good little first tip in the thing of sponsorships. Like, go ahead. And so I just figured, oh, okay, they're closed off. But it was after this thread opened where people were like, engagement, yeah, this is what they tell me. They told me that their whole thing is closed. With, like, all these black booktubers were coming out, like, yeah, I asked, I reached out and got nothing, or didn't even hear a response back. Meanwhile, all of the blogger friends who were white said they reached out to me. And there was one person who said that she had less subscribers than I did at the time, and they reached out to her and asked her to be a blogger friend after they had even denied me, because she wasn't even a blogger friend at the time. And so I think someone else was told that they would be put on a file or a list that they were going to pull from when they had some, you know, when they needed someone to go back and look for. And it was just this constant, like, run in the circle where I realized this was systematic. Like, to, first of all, for you to have this spiel ready that we're looking for family friendly, we're looking for, it means that you knew that your thing was not diverse, and you knew you needed a reason of why, because you knew that something was up. It also meant, considering that I had asked back in 2017 and was one of the biggest black booktubers at the time, I want to say even, like, I don't know if I still am, but was at the time in the last year or so, the fact that they were saying they were looking for diversity, but could not find it. Strange. It was a conversation. It's like, interesting how you're backtracking. And so, to me, it just screams that it was very systematic. How I felt about it was I was seeing very clearly that whomever was working on these things had a preference, but also knew that their preference was skewed. To me, it is not acceptable that I can work with ignorance. I cannot work with purposeful ignorance. Like, and that was the difference. And that's why I was like, nope, it's super skeezy. That's just, it's systematic and it's on purpose. Because you've had so many people reach out to you. You did not even have to go looking for these things. You didn't need a file. They were coming to you in droves. And so, yeah.
What do you think we can learn from this experience? Like, what do you think is a takeaway? Do you think, and maybe, obviously, we're not going to think of all the answers here. We're not about to fix the problem. But maybe what do you think we can do in a situation where that comes up again? Because this isn't going to be the last time that we have a shocking reveal that a company we all use is problematic, and that might be problematic in the Black Lives Matter movement, but it also might be like, oh, this company doesn't have any gay employees or something, right? It can come up in a lot of different ways. What do you think is the right course of action there?
I think as Black people, this won't be something new that we hear, but for people who used to dismiss diversity arguments, who would dismiss it by saying, well, maybe, it's not their fault if the audience prefers white faces, or if the audience prefers this type of person. It's not their fault. I think this is a great example for people who do know of Black content creators and do participate in diversifying their own lives, their own content consumption. People who do participate in this, to be able to then actually look at those types of companies, and if you see that everything is all white, ask why, and ask why very plainly and with your chest. I think that is something that we can learn from here, is that there is a problem. It's a wide problem, and just because, even if a community in itself is high percentage of one type of person, that does not mean that your consumption of whatever media you consume, especially in this day and age, I can't even make that argument. Because in this day and age where we have the internet and we are all so globally connected, I mean, you have Japanese people using boomer as a cultural phrase. Right. So, and we don't even speak the same language, you know what I mean? So for us to be that connected, it's not even an excuse anymore. For me to be so connected to other cultures in other countries, and to think about diversifying my own experience as a person in this world, it's like, if I'm there, I have no excuses for people who are like, well, my personal community. It's like, no, you don't just consume stuff from your personal community. You watch television, you watch shows and movies that aren't filmed, created, and made in your community. So there's no excuse. I mean, the Amish, I think it was the Mennonites, were out there talking about Black Lives Matter, and they're like some of the only people who can really discuss being like, I am in a cultural bubble. Like, I just don't vibe with outside world stuff. And even they were informed. So my thing is, like, what we can learn from this experience, that it is very real. Anytime someone has brought it up to you, we need to reflect and realize that we were probably dead wrong to ever question or think that somebody had an ulterior motive or was whining, or that there were reasons beyond the blanketed that we are biased. And that being biased isn't necessarily a 100% bad thing. You should be ashamed of yourself. But being biased, being unaware, being made aware of it, and still choosing to be biased, yes, and that one. So I think that that's something we can learn from it, is that you've been proved that your bias is you're aware now. Go for it.
I think that's so fascinating. I thank you for sharing what happened there. I think it was a disappointing moment for sure, as someone who has shopped there before. But exactly like you said, for me, it was obviously always disappointing that originally their vlogger friends weren't more diverse. But what I actually found more disappointing was their response, was how they dealt with having been faced with the news, with the information. Hey, we have looked at this information. Some people have receipts, some people have stories. Here is our experience of what's going on there, and their experience, or their response being, no, we're not. We're fine. That is the even more disappointing moment, because like you said, there is going to be bias. We've been raised in a very biased system, but to then not try and correct it, to not be like, okay, thank you so much for pointing this out. We are going to be talking internally about how to fix this, and we have 3 ideas already. Can you tell us more ideas? That kind of response would have been like, okay, this is a learning moment. I think that's really interesting. So here on BookTube, we can, and I think this really attaches to what you were saying, Francina. We're a global community on BookTube. There are different language barriers. There are like a lot of Spanish booktubers, and there are German booktubers or whatever. But in many ways, it's a very connected community. And you can be subscribed to someone from anywhere, with any background. I am a person who is half brown, half white, and so I feel that it's so important that I am subscribed to people that aren't just half brown, half white. So I can be thinking about different books, about different perspectives on the same books that I read. So this is a pretty straightforward question, but I think it's one that people really need to hear. Why is it important to be subscribed to Black booktubers, and to not be complacent with like, oh, I'm already subscribed to a bunch of booktubers, I don't need to maybe go out looking for Black booktubers? Christina, if you want to start off with any thoughts there. Again, I know it's a very simple question, but I think it's one that actually needs to be said.
I mean, the simplest answer is because we exist. You know?
Yes.
That's what it is. But I also think, I think you miss a huge opportunity, a huge addition to your life, you know, as a human being, to forfeit being able to meet people that are different than you, to learn about people who are different than you. Like, it's very obvious how much everybody loves Black culture, you know, with everything, you know, that you see in different cultures that are come from, you know, Africa or whatnot. And that in itself, even though, you know, some people could call it cultural appropriation or whatever, that in itself shows a skewed interest, but an interest, you know, in other. And I think that a lot of times the most basic thing within us is to fear the other, especially if we don't understand it, or if, you know, it's not something that we've seen before. But I mean, that's part of the human experience, right? To be able to connect with people and be able to have community and, you know, whatever it is. So I really just think that subscribing to different types of people, different kinds of people, just opens, you know, your world to something that's beyond just what's within your four walls.
I completely agree. Francina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, because I totally agree. Like, I center in what Christina Marie says, is that you need to open up your horizons beyond your four walls. But I also want to add that imagine the idea that you are what you eat. What you consume is what you become. And if you're the only way to break out of that is to, like, it's like when you consume everything, you are nothing. You know what I mean? Because if you, it's like the idea of the universe, it's everything and yet nothing at the same time, because it is all. And so when you're able to consume so much of your entertainment or your media, or specifically BookTube, right? If you are opening yourself up to so many other viewpoints and so many other different people who don't look like you, you are able to better define who you are. If you are consistently surrounding yourself by people who look like you, even if it's just based on skin color, who completely live their life in the same culture that you do, you are always trying to assimilate somehow into the better version of what you think you should be, the prettier version of what you think you should be. And all you do is end up tearing yourself down in this world of, I'm not quite like her, I'm not quite like him, or I'm not quite like them. I'm not, am I enough? Am I doing this? Instead, if you focus on people who are not like you, you can better understand who you are as an individual and be more comfortable with who you are. And it's like, if that doesn't sell people on it, you know what I mean? Like, just because he's come by.
I mean, and you can see how all of this is connected from the big all the way down to the minute. Like, it always starts, you know, it's systemic, all of it. You know, what the standards for what is acceptable, you know, is typically of the European, you know, appearance, like blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, it needs to look like this, it needs to be, you know, and you need to check all of these boxes. And I agree, Francina, you are, you know, what you consume. And I think that because it's such a systemic thing, that the generations that are newer and younger, they don't know any different. And so I think, and that's not an excuse at all, because it is about once you become aware, because there's no reason, especially if you're within this community, because Francina's not quiet. When I'm around, I'm not quiet. You know, so it's, first of all, willing to admit that you are ignorant, you know, in certain senses, and wanting to go beyond that. And so, as Francina said, it is really, it's great for me to know, you know, people that are different than me. And it's great for others to know people that are different than them, simply because it just makes us better people, you know? And so, yeah, that's
No. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's actually similar to what we were saying before, but it's like everyone watching this video right now has this opportunity to face the fact that their subscription box probably is not as diverse as it should be, and they can now respond in turn with fixing that problem. All right, well, Christina, I wanted to ask you a question because a couple of years ago, I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, I've lost all track of understanding time. You got to organize a panel at BookCon, and it was the greatest book panel I have actually ever gotten to go to. And you know I've told you this a million times, but I have been to a lot of BookTube panels in the past 9 years, and they have gotten very repetitive, very samey, and I like kind of feel like I'm going to the same one every time now. But your panel, it was very interesting. I guess it was a bit more bookturnet-y, like you had voices outside of BookTube as well. But I wanted to ask you about why, and again, simple question, but I think it will be an important answer. Why is it important that in spaces like BookTube, we aren't just making sure that we're hitting a diversity quota of like, oh, do we have one Black person on the panel, but also allowing Black people, and I guess, of course, other minorities, to have an organizing role in that experience, like to actually be creating these things. And specifically for you, like how that went about with this, and maybe what are ways that other people in the community can be making sure that that wasn't a one-time thing.
How that all started was the year before. So it was last year that the panel happened. So in 2018, when I went to Book Expo and BookCon, I was so just hyper aware of being the only amongst my BookTube crew, especially after that New York Times article. It was just me. It was me. And that in itself was troublesome, but I remember just walking around the, Javits, and just seeing, I didn't see myself. You know, I would see Tony Adeyemi or Nick Stone. Their books would be there, but their faces wouldn't be. You know, but you see a big old picture of, you know, Bill Clinton and James Patterson and, you know, all of that. Like, everybody knows these old men. Like, what, you know, you have some new faces, some people that are bringing something, you know, to the book world, and you don't have their faces anywhere, you know. And so just walking around and encountering different experiences with people, that it just felt so flat and so surface. I said, we are missing opportunities here. All the Black people that you have here, all 6 of us, should not be on the same panel, you know, talking about diversity. You know, like, what? You know, we're talking about our lives. This is what we have to go through every single day. What, do we have to do this again? How come we can't, you know, be on a sci-fi panel? Or how come we can't be on a fantasy panel? Or how come we can't be on an industry panel? We always get, you know, put in this box of speaking about diversity and inclusion, which is great, but at the same time, there's more to us than that. And so I just didn't see a lot of that. And so I made a really not so PG video about my disappointment with everything. And apparently the folks at Book Expo or whatever, Read Pop, whatever they're called, they reached out to me and asked me to curate a panel for them. And I was like, okay, what kind of panel? Let's talk about this. And they said, just whatever you want to do. And so yeah, I did it all myself. Like, I did everything. I picked who I wanted, you know, I formatted everything, and it was, and to be completely honest, here's the part that pisses me off. It didn't at the time, but it does now. I did all of it for free.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Because at that time, my focus was on, it needs to happen. You know, I will worry about me and my, you know, feelings later. It needs to happen. This is something that needs to be a part of just Bookternet, you know, Booktube and everything, because these conversations are what are going to give people hope that they will have increased, you know, visibility. There is a community for them, and they're not just, you know, the booktubers that are just going to be, you know, stuck at 100 subscribers because nobody wants to subscribe to them. And so having that, and that was also around the time where there was just constant drama between Bookstagram and Booktube and bloggers and all of that. So it kind of all just worked together for us to all be on the same stage talking about our love of books.
Books online, yeah.
Yeah, so last year it just all came together so well. I didn't write any of those questions out until probably about an hour before. Because if I write them too soon, I'll start overthinking and change everything. But the thing that made it worth it for me was after it happened. For me, it all started as just an outlet of my frustration with this industry, you know, at how one-dimensional it tends to be. But, after that panel, I heard from so many people that were there. You know, we recorded it, so I put it on my channel, and I heard from people then too. And it's just, that's what solidified it for me, that this is bigger than what it even started out as. You know, I have no problem taking myself out of the equation at this point, because I feel like it's almost like handing it over to, you know, the upcoming younger booktubers that have, you know, brilliant ideas, you know, and, you know, innovative ways of doing things. I don't have that. You know, that's not my wheelhouse. But I'm hoping that I'm kind of disappointed that even though we didn't have BookCon and Book Expo this year, we still had it online, and there was just nothing, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know what that was about, but I do, but...
They seem to have excluded the entire internet people
from the internet, right? Right? Yeah.
It was really strange. I agree with that, even just as someone who was watching it, because I didn't really watch any of their things. Just kind of watching it unfold on Instagram, I was like, I guess this is happening. I didn't even know it was really going on. What is that? I agree, that is strange.
Because here's the thing that happened. Last year, I committed to doing it again this year.
Okay.
And crickets, you know, this year. And for me, I was either going to do it and get paid for it this time around, or I was going to pass the opportunity to somebody else, you know, but, yeah, I just think it would be a huge miss and a huge slap in the face to everybody that benefited from last year to not have it keep going. It doesn't have to be me, you know, doesn't have to be Francina. It can be anybody, you know, that deserves to have that platform to tell about, you know, their stories and what's going on. I swear I don't know what's going on with the Gen X, or what is it, Gen Z people. I don't know anything. I don't know, because Francina be retweeting stuff. I don't know. So,
I love my Gen Z people.
see, you know, so that would be awesome for me to just even learn and see, you know, I'm like, oh, you are 12 years younger than me, but girl, you go ahead, you know. I just want them to feel empowered, because for me, I have to do it on myself. You know, I had to empower myself, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah. So, Francina, do you kind of have any thoughts on Christina's experience?
I do. I mean, I was getting teary because, like, I was there during the panel, and I remember crying during the panel because it was just so, for me, it was a moment of being able to see true diversity, and one, to know that she did not get paid. Like, but to also the frustration of knowing how normal that is. Like, how normal, not only as a content creator not to get paid, like, a damn for anything, even though, like, would have never known about BEA or BookCon as, like, someone who enjoyed books without BookTube. But also as a woman of color who literally they came to you and needed you and asked you to do all of this work with no pay. Yeah. Knowing that, like, they paid for somebody to come and probably speak for 2 minutes about something who they thought was going to garner a huge audience, who probably did not garner nearly the same audience as your video upload.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. As someone who has been to BookCon like a lot of different times throughout the years. The first year I went, I think it was 2013, and I've been many years, and I've been on many different panels. I have never been paid to go and speak. I have never had anything covered. Like, they've never covered flights or a hotel room for even a night, even though they wanted. So I think that clearly that is a problem BookCon is having, and that they really need to sort out, because it's demanding a lot of labor and a lot of content creation that it wouldn't work without, right? Like, their BookCon wouldn't work without these interesting panels that we then go on to talk about. But they're expecting them all for free. But it's especially devastating when, like, we all know how much that panel meant to this community, and to hear that, Christina, you just, like, and then to hear that, like, they never messaged you again, it's just, like, yeah.
Especially, and then on top of it, like, everybody's been pivoting with COVID-19, and to have a no-cost, like, event, an event that cost them, like it honestly probably took the burden off of them to do it virtually, and to not invite you back to speak, like, there's, like, it makes legitimately no sense, and it doesn't make sense. One, like, I want to say at a broader level, when you're talking about you're going to do an event online but not invite the people who actually have an online audience, who have given you BookCon because of that online audience. Like, it's only, like, let's be honest, it's only growing every year. Yeah, everybody's excited to go see authors, but they're only excited because they've been seeing these experiences happen on YouTube, and they want to take part in it. That's an experience, not just waiting. They could wait for this author to come to their local bookstore or their next closest major city and save on plane tickets. But it's, like, to me, insane on that level. And then on another level, at the current times that we are living in all of 2020, to take the time out to get your commitment on doing another one and then say nothing. Because you can't tell me that the time when they thought about canceling it was sometime after January. They didn't think, oh, we should probably talk to her and reach out and let her know that she needs to come up with some stuff for a panel to figure out some people, because that takes time. You're not going to be able to turn that around in 3 months if people have to travel and you have to make sure that people are going to be there, et cetera, et cetera. So it already tells me that they did not care from jump, even when they knew their event was happening. And that's where I'm just like, there's a trash can right here, and I just throw them away.
So this is the realist in me again. You know, I just, for me, and it's a means of personal protection. I know that, to just never expect anything, you know, beyond what's in front of me. And honestly, the thing that made it worth it for me, like I said, was the after. The conversations, the tweets, the Instagram. I screenshot all of them, and they're still on my phone, you know, when I am not feeling 100%, you know, because I haven't been, you know, around pretty much since this time last year. You know, it's just, after that panel and after everything, I just completely was just done. Like, in terms of energy, like, I had nothing else to say, nothing else to do. I didn't want to. But knowing what that meant to people was important for me in that moment, because a lot of times I do question my presence, you know, within BookTube, for the simple fact that I will never you know, buy, you know, the expensive cameras and have, you know, this, that, and the other and all the bells and whistles. It's just not in me. Like, I said it on the panel. I don't like filming. I don't like editing. I don't like anything like that. I love this community. Like, if I could just hit record and then hit upload and be done with it, I would do that all the time. but it just takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And the older I get, the higher my value for myself gets. And so it would have been a different conversation this time around, you know, had they asked me to do it again. But I really would love, because a lot of times we have two options. It's either work with the programs that are already here or start our own. And both of those things are great. But for me, my preference is to work with the programs that are already in place. Because if you don't have to start from, you know, scratch, then don't. And so I would personally, because I know some of the people from, you know, BookCon, and they're great people, you know, they're just a small part of a bigger, you know, thing. And so there are conversations to be had for sure. And so I don't want anyone to get discouraged from, you know, my experience or anything like that, because I still am glad that it happened, because there were still fruit from a lot of that. But there's definitely a much better way to do it. And it was a slap in the face that you had an online, you know, deal happening and you didn't invite anyone, you know, from... Like I said, it didn't even have to be me. That's the thing. Right, but yeah.
Right.
Well, let's talk about books more generally. I guess we're booktubers and we like books. we have an author in our midst here, Francina Simone. Your book is coming out very soon. Smash It. It's coming out in September. It's linked down below. Go pre-order it, for God's sakes. But I'd love to ask you, why do you think that books are a really great tool right now for the Black Lives Matter movement? Like, why right now do you think that we're actually I feel pretty lucky that we're in the BookTube community in this moment, and we can use books to have some of these conversations? Francina, we can start over there.
I'm going to say two things. I think books are extremely important just because knowledge is free. You can go to the library. You can use Libby online and download ebooks. You can listen to them for free. Like, it's free. It's not something that... It's not starting a conversation... Oh, I should say this. It's not starting an awkward conversation with a person that you don't know. Like, there are so many times people are like, just go out and find someone black and talk to them. And I'm like, if someone ever... I'm trying to get some almond milk at the grocery store, talking about, what's your experience like? Excuse me. But it's a conversation with a person who is with you in that moment, in that room, to share their story or their perspective or something. And you can digest it. It's not something you have to do publicly. It's not even something that you have to talk about with other people to digest. You can have that conversation with you inward. But I also feel like, as far as books and what publishing needs to just get into gear more, is stop tokenizing Black people. And I feel like as perspective as an author, it's so easy to see when authors are tokenized, and because publishing is so weird, because people, you don't work for a publisher, you work for yourself, and your book is being published, and there's so many different details and nuances. Like, we had the hashtag publishing paid me, and even that is so nuanced, because it's not about the value of the book, but the value of, are people going to come out and buy this book? How can the value of, if I can market this well, I don't know how. No one in this team knows how to market a book about Black kids to people who aren't Black. And it's like, oh my God, the skewedness, right? So there's so much that goes into it, where in these spaces, these marketing and sales teams know how to market tragedy porn. People have been doing it for so long. I mean, I remember reading a Dickens book, Bleak House, in like college, and they talked about philanthropic, telescopic philanthropy, which is like this old British woman sending like her petticoats to like Africans who she thought were savage and naked, and meanwhile her kids look like a hot mess and were crazy. So at least he was making some commentary on it. But the idea, and she was like passing around flyers and talking about these people as if they were a tragedy. Like the tragedy porn, and all these women were giddy to like go and help these poor savages. And it's like, we have, as a community, and we're all guilty of it, is looking at someone who does not have and being told, like, feel grateful for what you have, look upon this, the unfortunate, and reflect on yourself. And so a lot of the books about Black people and about racism is just that. It's a gaze in to feel guilt and to feel shame and to feel you're privileged, but it's like, but are you learning anything? Or are you just feeling guilty? You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to teach you how to feel relatable. Like, you can't relate to that. Even some Black people can't relate to some of this stuff. Like, it's deep and it's heavy, and I feel like that's all publishing knows how to market. And so that's why we see books like Thug that are super important. But it is like the top book. When someone says, have you read a book by a Black author? They ask you if you've read Thug. And it's like the shame that people think that every African-American girl, that her life is symbolic of this. That's what she must go through. And so when you're asked to relate or to understand, you're like, oh yeah, you and your poor, like, you know, poor girl, she's probably seen so many people get shot. And it's like, whoa, yeah, the dying, the tragedy, and, oh, you know, I don't want to be that white friend who points out these things. And you're just like, okay, take it a few steps back. That's not my story. It's a story, and it's something that I am definitely not blind to. And because of that awareness, I know how to walk in this world aware and open, eyes wide open. However, can we get some stuff, like, first we need to stop tokenizing this, and can we get some stuff that is relatable to show people that these are lives. This is why you keep dehumanizing people, because you see me through violence. You don't see me and my life and my joy and my happiness and my struggles that are, yes, first world struggles, as we like to call them, right? Like, my struggles with love and my struggles with whatever have you, my just relationships with people. And I feel like books are so important when you have the full spectrum of them and when you stop tokenizing them, because diversity will have completed its job when you look at a shelf and you pick up a story and you cannot default. You don't default and you don't center yourself and feel like freaked out because, I don't know, this story is about a non-binary person who is going to the moon and really wants to be an astronaut, and I just can't because where's the romance? I just can't. I don't understand. Are you a woman or a man? I don't get it because I identify as a woman. Like, you know, if we could just pick up a book and not do that, I feel like we will have come so far.
That was great. That was really interesting, Francina. Christina, you were nodding a lot. You had but obviously you agree. But I'd love to hear your perspective on it. Why do you think books are a great tool right now? But also if you want to respond to anything.
Oh gosh, like just. I have such a deep and intimate relationship with just words, period. You know, words mean things. You know, that's what it is. And books have always been a means of entertainment for me, a means of learning for me, a means of comfort, you know, for me, a means of, you know, escape, whatever it is. Books have the power to do so much. And so for that power to be that big and that large and, you know, and that grandiose, and have Black authors, Black female authors, Black stories, period, be so just, you know, off in the corner and not really, you know, fed into as everything else, it's incredibly insulting without even saying a word. You know, like, people can look at, you know, a young Black girl can look at what's going on and just automatically start to understand that she's not as valuable as her white counterpart. Like, you don't have to say explicitly that, you know, this person doesn't matter. You demonstrate that with where your money goes, you know, with where your time goes, with where your focus goes. And that in itself, Francina, when you were talking about tokenizing in books, I mean, that's very, very true for entertainment, period. You know, movies and, you know, things like that. I mean, I thank you for showing, you know, the slave period and, you know, letting people know what we've, you know, our ancestors have gone through. But I have not gone through that. I am sitting here trying to figure out how I'm going to get a C- in my science class. You know, like, just normal stuff. That's what makes people relatable. That's what connects people. And I feel like, because again, we're fighting against a systemic issue, it's almost like sometimes people in the majority just want to cram, things into people's mouths. Like, hey, you wanted Black literature, so here's this and here's this. Let's give you the most extreme of the dramatic, blah, blah, blah. And that's not how I want my story told. That's not how I want to be perceived. And the reason why that's so important to me is because, again, as Francina said earlier, you are what you consume. People start to take these ideas and start to, root them in their minds, and that's their perception of what, Black girl is, or where Black people live, or, what their families are like. I can't even begin to tell you the whole, Black girl, her father leaving her, thing. That situation is a trigger for me because it's true for me, but that's not all, that's part of the Black experience. And I just think that because there's not the right people in leadership positions, it's flying over, you're missing the point. Like, the point is staring you in the face and you're still just walking right by it, So it's just, I think that there needs to be, more involvement from, let's see, Francina, talking to, her editor, her publisher, or whatever, me, talking to whomever my connects are, just making sure that those perspectives aren't lost, in the weeds, because I love The Hate You Give. I really do, but I love it for what it did for everybody else. It didn't speak to me like that at all. And that's okay. But I want people to reach for, go beyond that, want more than just that. And so all of that to say, yeah.
Francina, I feel like you wanted to add something on there.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's also another way of forced assimilation. So as you grow up a person of color, and the only books that you read that you can relate to, let's just say, like, fantasy, we have the Cassandra Clare books, we have Sarah J. Maas books, we have Leah Bardugo, where before Six of Crows, I definitely want to say, like, let's talk about 2012 to 2015, like, a lot of the books were predominantly all white main cast, and especially white women or white girls who were at the forefront. And even with contemporary, it's the same thing. They're all white, and it's all, like, white-centric problems. As someone who also grows up in American culture, that's the only thing you have to relate to. And the other thing, as a person of color story, whether it be you're Black or Hispanic, it's always slavery, crossing over the border, because apparently in America no other Hispanics exist. If it has to do with being Muslim, it has to do with, like, all sorts of regimes and the rigidity, and, like, and there's no way for you to exist in your culture in America without assimilating and trying, like, okay, if I want to live a normal life, it's a white life. If I want to live in my culture or celebrate my culture, I must live in the negative and then the tragedy of it. And yeah, it's like, it's subtle, but that's why I feel like so many people also have issues with the dichotomy between, like, well, I don't feel like I've never personally been brutalized, so is this really an experience? Or, like, I can believe the news too, that, well, maybe he did do something wrong because I've never X, Y, and Z. That's why it's, it's another form of consumption. You are what you eat, and it's deep in there.
It's a great conversation, and I think maybe something I hadn't thought about in those words, but when a book like The Hate You Give blows up in the way that it did, suddenly we're all feeling very proud that we read it, or proud that it became so big, and we're like, yes, I do know about the Black experience, I've read The Hate You Give, and it's like, about one Black experience, right? And because it because so few things are getting published within that minority, it's speaking for everyone. That's really, really interesting. Well, before we go, because this is BookTube, I want to ask if you had to recommend one book for understanding things right now, or a book that you just wish more people were reading right now, other than Smash It by Francina Simone, pre-order now. Which book would that be, do you think? Let's start, Christina Marie.
Oh, I actually just finished this one probably about an hour or so ago.
Okay.
It's
hot off the press.
It's not, fiction. That's not where my brain is right now. It's I'm Still Here by Austen Channing Brown. Yeah. It's pretty much her story of navigating, who she is as a Black woman in a white world, and what that looks like. And that story, I will say, is probably the closest to my life on paper that I've ever read. And so it will teach you a lot. She specifically said that when she talks to, white women, she'll ask, did you throw the book against the wall? Like, did it make you angry? Because she wants that reaction. She wants you to be angry. It should trigger something. I mean, for me, it didn't, because, oh, yeah, I remember doing that. I remember this happening. Right. But I really do think that it is a great read without being too, it's not preachy, which is what I, try and steer clear of. I just think, and it's short, so it's a really, really quick read.
Oh, perfect. Well, I'm definitely gonna have to check it out. Francina, what I saw you referencing the iPad.
I did. So I needed to double check the title. It's obviously Stories from My Timeline by Akilah Hughes. She's actually also a YouTuber. Yeah, she's hilarious. Like, when you said it was relatable, I was like, see this book? I knew this, why this jumped in my head, because it was extremely relatable to me. It's like, it's all about her life growing up, what kind of formed her to be who she is. It's also short. I love listening to it. She narrates her own audiobook. And it's a beautiful experience of a Black girl who has so many different experiences being Black, but also being American, and also her career and coming up and becoming a YouTuber, and how she's had to navigate the world. So I think it's a beautiful book. That's why I tend to lean towards memoirs, especially when I recommend books to people, is because it's her actual experience.
Right.
There's very little, I wouldn't say that there's no tragedy. Everybody has tragedy and struggle, but there's very little, there's no trauma porn. And it's all a perspective that we can all relate to by one way or another, even though sometimes some of her things are racial related. And it's a gateway into being like, oh wow, this is a layer on someone's life and not, a whole separate thing.
Right. Yeah.
So that one's my favorite. Obviously,
fantastic.
Stories from My Timeline.
I need both of these on audiobook, because like nonfiction I'm enjoying on audiobook so much right now. It's like a podcast. For some reason it feels like a perfect podcast kind of thing, and I can pause it without being like, oh my god, I forget everything that happened. Well, thank you so much to both of you for talking with me today. I have absolutely learned a lot, and I feel I don't know, I do feel, Christina, I feel opposite to you. I do feel hopeful. I think that conversations like this can make a difference, and I'm so glad to have had you here on my channel. To everyone who's watching, thank you for watching this video. Links to the books that you guys just mentioned, but also to any other resources that we mentioned throughout the video will be linked down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Bye!
Woo! We did it! Oh, thank you so much.